What are you talking about? Of course Battle for Bikini Bottom was good, it even got a remaster. Well, once upon a time, when video games were still in their awkward tween phase, consoles, handhelds, and PCs often got very different games sold under the same name, and Battle for Bikini Bottom is no exception. Its multi-platform release gave us a minigame collection on PC, developed by Aw Games, the console version giving us the best licensed game to ever be developed, thanks to Heavy Iron Studios, and a 2D platformer on the GameBoy Advance, courtesy of Vicarious Visions. All of them releasing October 29th, 2003. And since I don't like thinking about how long ago that was, let's talk about Battle for Bikini Bottom for the GBA instead. The core plot of the game is pretty much the same as the console versions and can be summarized by saying that Plankton may want to consider Adderall. He builds this big elaborate machinery to construct an unstoppable robot army, but because Plankton has as much executive dysfunction as I do, he forgot to set the Obey Plankton switch to on, resulting in that robot army revolting against him and causing absolute havoc all over Bikini Bottom. The next morning, SpongeBob heads to work and gets drafted into solving this problem by Mr. Krabs. So now the entire mess is SpongeBob's to clean. And after we learn about Sandy's browser history, we're off on this heroic quest. To progress in this game, you need to find the 3 golden spatulas hidden throughout each level and bring them to the portal machine at the end. Why exactly you have to do this isn't particularly clear, and the where they came from and why you need them lore isn't really given. Though this is a SpongeBob game from 2003, so maybe I'm overthinking this. In addition to the spatulas, you have Krabby Patties spread throughout each level, and if you find all of them, you're taken to an auto-scroller bonus level, where your goal is to make it to the end while collecting all the Krabby Patties in the stage. Doing so will net you some fun little rewards, but they're not really worth your time unless you're trying to get 100%. The movement and control here is already a massive step up from Legend of the Lost Spatula in every way. SpongeBob is far more responsive, though there is still some slipperiness and delay. This is far from unplayable though, and even almost enjoyable. We have all the basic movement you'd expect. We have a jump, a crouch, a crawl, and an attack. Added to SpongeBob's options though are this float move where SpongeBob inflates himself and glides a bit for some extra distance. We also have new mechanics with our attacks. They're still done using the bubble wand, but now those bubbles can activate and deactivate robots, which is used a pretty great effect later on for puzzle solving. We do have even more movement options added though, in the form of everyone's favorite steed, Mystery the Seahorse. That's a big wee snaw from me. Mystery has a higher jump, a hover ability taking the place of SpongeBob's float, and the ability to store enemies in her mouth and spit them out where you need them. If that also sounds like a puzzle mechanic, it's because it is. Mystery's chomp can also eat coral walls, and you can do a proper Super Mario World by dismounting Mystery in the air for some added height on your jump, which again is used as a puzzle mechanic. Do yourself a favor and get used to me saying the word puzzle, because this game is closer to a puzzle platformer than just a plain 2D platformer. Now, I won't be going through each and every level in depth, it's just beyond the scope that I wanted to have for this video. However, there are 2 specific levels I'll go over for varying reasons. But on the topic of levels, they're leaps and bounds better here. There's generally 4 level themes that we have variations of throughout, and that's Sand Mountain, Jellyfish Fields, Downtown Bikini Bottom, and a forest setting. They all feel unique and pleasant in the presentation here. Levels tend to even visually start to have elements of the next level near the end, which is a touch I really like. It makes it feel a lot more organic, even though you're just going from a level select screen. Enemies have had a lot of changes to them as well. For starters, most of them can't hurt you directly. You walk into most enemies and you'll both bump backwards. The same with jumping on most of them, you'll get a big bounce from stepping on their heads. And it's used for a lot of platforming that, for the most part, feels pretty good. There are still enemies that can hurt you, of course. There's these little guys with spikes that alternate between being on top of their head and around their body. There's electric enemies that will damage you if you make contact while they're electrified, And there's bullet launching enemies that are used for puzzles sometimes as well. And these bomb enemies, which aren't actively hostile, but if you're not careful, you can end up blowing yourself up and feeling pretty stupid. Not that I had that happen or anything. This game impressed and surprised me. The difficulty ramps up very gradually, and mechanics are introduced and recur throughout the rest of the game, making for a very satisfying soup of problem solving. There are some levels that had me a bit high-strung. One of them being Sandy's Tree Dome, which is the only level in the game where you have to regularly stop by bird baths to fill your wet up, otherwise you die. Which wouldn't be too bad, but for some reason SpongeBob has a max of 60 wet and it runs out pretty fast. The level itself was fairly fun and satisfying for me to find my way around, but the constant monitoring of SpongeBob's amount of wet definitely distracted from it. Most of the puzzles in the game do require some decent problem solving, and do feel good when you get through them. There are quite a few instances where the game feels like maybe it wasn't tested enough, because the solutions to a lot of these puzzles feel like something that shouldn't work or that wasn't intended. Though if that was an intentional design choice, bravo, you have succeeded. The puzzles revolve around rearranging enemies or objects in a way that changes what you have access to, finding and using keys for doors, and good old platforming. The platforming is a bit hit and miss for me, sadly. It can feel good here and there, but more often it's just barely not responsive enough to be enjoyable. The puzzle mechanics, on the other hand, are pretty fun, but as I mentioned before, they do overstay their welcome in a lot of levels. One in particular for me was Industrial Robolution, one of the last levels of the game. It's entirely possible it's just a skill issue on my part, but I played this level for an hour. The puzzles don't all work exactly as intended. The level is huge and complicated and goes on for an eternity, and there's plenty of opportunities for you to die and lose all the progress you made. I can't give it too much crap though. If I wasn't trying to get footage for a video, it might not have been as stressful. After all the platforming and puzzle solving, what do you get after you make it through all the levels in a chapter? Why, of course, it's boss fights against Robo Sandy, Robo Patrick, Robo Squidward, and SpongeBot Steel Pants. These are all very unremarkable fights, so I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. For Sandy, just avoid her jumping around and jump on her head. Once she gets lower in health, she'll start literally throwing hands, but it's nothing too interesting. Robo Patrick chases you through jellyfish fields as you ride atop Mystery, chomping up bomb enemies and spitting them at Patrick. That's really it, and if he catches you, you just die, so that's fun. Robo Squidward is easily the most obnoxious boss fight. I did not enjoy this one at all. Robo Squid is huge and you can only see the bottom half of him from the ground. You use Mystery to eat a bomb enemy and spit it at Squid's head, and you do this by waiting for one of his 4 tentacles to slam the ground and riding it back up. But you can't see them until they're coming down at you, and you can only see 2 of them at a time because of how wide this boy is. Which means I got hit a lot by slamming tentacles that I just couldn't see coming, and this fight also just goes on for far too long. Finally, Robo Sponge himself. It's also slightly obnoxious and boring. The fight starts with you versus the Duplicatotron itself, and you know the drill. Spit bombs at a specific part enough times, and then you win. And then Mech Bob will come in, and it's the same thing. He flies left and right, hovers at the ends of the conveyor belt stage, and slings bomb Krabby Patties at you. You beat him the same way as all the others, the day is saved, and you watch an unnecessarily long credit scroll put over a few frames of one of the walk cycles from SpongeBob the Lost Episode, all while the chiptune version of the theme song plays on a never-ending repeat. What a ride this game brought me on. Aside from playing Super Sponge on the GBA as a kid, I haven't had any experience with these games, and I was always under the impression they were just lesser garbage versions of the console games. Turns out I was wrong this whole time. So then, is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom on the GameBoy Advance underrated? I think so, yeah. This is a solid game, and for the most part, I had a good time playing it. It definitely feels like it was just overshadowed by the massive success of the console version and never really given the opportunity to shine as much as it could have. Would I recommend playing it? Yeah, why not? Thank you so much for watching. I'd appreciate it if you'd tap the subscribe button and drop a like, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this game. Until next time, I love you all.